social environment, covering issues such as ethics and social factors of business. So let's look at the social environment. The social environment is defined as the environmental factors that influence the behaviour of organisations. Typically these include both demographical and natural environmental factors. We're going to look at all these factors later on in this presentation. So the social environment is going to have an impact on the decision making that any organisation is going to make. Typically, an organisation needs to respond to the social needs and build up an understanding of what their consumers' social attitudes are going to be if they're going to be successful. This is heavily linked with marketing. However, it needs to be carefully managed so it doesn't appear to be a marketing ploy, and it's a general gesture that the organisation is going to make towards improving their social and ethical footprint. It is really important you manage this, because this can lead to bad PR as well as exceptionally good PR. So let's look at demographics. Now demographics is basically looking at the changes and the characteristics of data within the population. So within the UK we've got a population of 60 million people. We typically have an ageing population that's getting older. We have an increase in car ownership, and we have an increase in the levels of education. Now if you think about the ageing population, that's going to have a massive effect on maybe new products that you launch as an organisation. You might want to try and focus at an ageing demographic. A good example of this is Saga, who are now going to float on the stock market and sell shares publicly. They've seen their product portfolio grow rapidly over the last couple of years based on the fact that the ageing population is pushing demand for holidays for the over 50s. The increase in car ownership has led to car manufacturers reporting their best years for a long time for car sales in the UK, but it's also led to, for example, location changes at organisations. So people like Marks and Spencer's are now looking to locate in out-of-town shopping centres rather than in the town centre, because access to free, cheap parking has become more important to the consumer and the taste of the owner. And then of course you've got the increasing levels of education. So that means that people are now starting to become more educated, they may demand more wages, they become more affluent, but at the same time they look to do different jobs, so they're probably moving towards a tertiary sector more than the primary and secondary sector. However, there has been a drive to bring manufacturing back, and that's been a government intervention to try and drive that change. Notice how it all links collectively together. And then of course you've got to look at the environmental considerations. So organisations typically now become more aware of the impact they have on the environment. This is being pressurised by some of their stakeholders. The thing is that by becoming concerned about the environment, because consumers have become more ethically concerned, so they actually care about the environment now, and it's more talked about and more considered, this has opened up new markets, and as a result of this, it's creating more potential for organisations to tap into these markets and diversify and grow. And these markets are now fast changing and fast developing markets, and markets which are showing real potential, and because of that you get a high level of added value. There are many organisations such as Lush, for example, who have been able to tap into these new growing markets and become a real strong player. And if you think about Marks and Spencer and Waitrose, they're examples of retailers who've done exactly that by diversifying into a small niche area. Now Marks and Spencer is a great example of how to do what we call CSR and tapping into these new markets. M&S creates a corporate social responsibility plan, and they have like plan A, plan B and plan C. Plan A the most important, followed by plan B, followed by plan C. Now they will report to their stakeholders and their shareholders every year on their performance against their targets. So for example, they say they want to have zero net CO2 emissions, so they want to balance their CO2 emissions. I think they plant a tree to counterbalance any CO2 that they use. So they're trying to even it out. That's the way they do it. You will see all organisations say exactly the same. I believe that one of the advertisers on, when I've seen some of my BeeBusinessBee actual videos back on YouTube, is Paper for Portugal, and they claim to plant 2 trees for every 1 ream of paper that's being purchased from them. Not that I'm trying to advertise them, but you know, I'm just saying that it was quite interesting to see that. That was a very big and bold CSR statement. Reduce the waste that they send to landfill is an M&S policy, so they want to try and recycle more, and that fits in with one of their targets about recycling. They want to increase their charity donations and participations. They want to reduce the level of miles travelled by the food in the stores and try and source more local, tapping into that unique selling point. Again, adds massive levels of value. They want to reduce the amount of energy they use, and they want to drive more green energy usage in their organisation. Again, massive changes, massive drive towards big change in the organisation. Now that fits in with this idea of CSR. Now CSR is what's called corporate social responsibility, and this is an organisation's decision where they accept social, ethical, moral actions. Now there are critics out there. Some critics argue that CSR is no longer what it was originally set out to be. It is a PR exercise. It's about making your organisation look good. The marketing department will now spin your PR claims to become some real promotion. Critics would argue M&S have done this. When you go shopping at M&S, you see their CSR statement being promoted in your face, driven on the wall continually. However, you also need to think about CSR could be argued to be a needless expense of an organisation. For example, the shareholders may be concerned that you're spending money on some objectives which maybe are going to hinder their returns. Their dividends will be reduced by a result of this. Of course, the other side of the argument is put forward there that CSR actually increases the long-term profitability and gives you more added value and increased returns. Performance on your CSR targets needs to be reported in your CSR report, which tends to go out to stakeholders and shareholders as part of your annual report at the end of every year. So we need to consider the impact of environmental and ethical issues on an organisation looking from an evaluative point of view. So the obvious benefits are that it can increase your levels of added value, which of course increases your profit margins. It could lead to a USP being established. So like Waitrose have established that unique selling point of being an ethical retailer when it comes to supermarkets. It could enable you to be able to access and tap into new markets, which obviously are constantly emerging and developing within your own domestic market or maybe overseas, for example. You could be able to enhance your customer relationships and build a closer link and a closer brand loyalty, which of course overall reduces your marketing costs and increases your brand awareness and will give you that USP and that added value. Think of Lush for an example of how they are successfully managing to do that. And also it can lead to cost savings, because being environmental could reduce wastage, and of course, as you all know, wastage is an added cost which can increase the overall cost of the organisation. However, and this is where your evaluation comes in, you need to think about long-term, short-term issues. What's the long-term profitability gains? Well, maybe okay, you're going to see savings, but in the short term you may need to invest in new technology or more expensive technology to deliver your CSR. How do shareholders feel about that? What's the impact on their dividends? Will they want to keep their money invested in your company when you're giving them reduced dividends because you're investing in ethical issues? Possible PR damage could happen. If you use the ethics to be a PR tool, but it's a real obvious gimmick, and it becomes so obvious that the PR is not being used because you actually care about the environment, more to try and increase your sales, that can have a negative effect on your image and your brand reputation. And also, what are the social needs of your customers? They keep constantly changing, so this could be something that considerably changes all the time, and you feel like you're investing in the same issues constantly over and over again. Again, something which have a knock-on effect on your overall investment of the shareholders and their consideration and attitudes towards your CSR. Okay, that's it. You should now have an understanding of the social and ethical considerations on an organisation and how it impacts on the decisions that they may take. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter, it's at BeeBusinessBee, or subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can tweet me any areas of business you want me to cover in the future, and don't forget to check out my website, it's BeeBusinessBee.co.uk.